Welcome to episode 248 of the Necronama.com.
You know what's really scary? Book bans. Long a tool of authoritarians, book bans are a direct threat to our freedom to read. That's why Library Foundation SD, Brooklyn Public Library, and other partners across the country have launched Books Unbanned to fight this evil. This campaign makes frequently banned or challenged books available through a digital catalog to young people across the U.S., including states with increasing book bans. Like your local library, it's completely free to sign up. Want to learn more, including how you can help increase access to the books we love? Visit libraryfoundationsd.org.
Fright Rags has been bringing you the best in horror apparel and accessories since 2003, offering a wide range of products for your favorite creature features, slasher flicks, and cult classics. Officially licensed collections include titles like John Carpenter's The Thing, The Evil Dead, Creep Show, Jaws, the Halloween franchise, and so many more. Head on over to fright-rags.com. Make sure to sign up for their SMS and email newsletter to never miss a drop. Listeners get 10% off when they use the code NECRO10, all caps, at checkout. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now. And if there's one thing that the Twilight Zone taught me, it's how to cook for 40 humans.
And I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host the podcast that you're listening to. And kids, it's history time because I'm going to, talk about history and how this movie, TV series, and everything itself would not have been possible if not for the murder, torture, and lynching of a little boy in Mississippi.
We're going there already. Excellent.
Oh, I'm going to go there.
And I'm Alex Woodrow, and I am not going to be following that. Don, the floor is all yours.
All right, let's start with Alex, though.
Alex. Go ahead, Alex.
All right, Alex, tell our listeners a bit about yourself, and also welcome back, because we had such a blast the last 8 times you were here.
Thank you. Goodness, doing Cabinet is going to remain one of my favorite memories of things I've done in publishing. I swear, that was so much fun. But yeah, to anybody who doesn't know, all 5 of you, I'm Alex Woodrow. I'm a writer. I'm an editor. I work for Tenebrous Press. I publish books. I occasionally write my own stuff. And I am tuning in today from the wonderful region of Transylvania in Romania, which is my segue to say that I am talking to you from the former Soviet bloc country of Romania, who was a dictatorship until basically exactly when I was born, but still felt the effects of that for a very, very long time. And before we started recording this, we were just talking about how I mentioned that we ended up in a dictatorship because the first time we voted for those people to rule us, because of lies and media manipulation, and because they assured us we'd never have to worry about anything again. And I guess that thing that Trump said today or yesterday about, go and vote now, and then you're not going to have to do that again, really triggered a lot of stuff in me. And it's a huge part of our culture still. Like, we study this shit so it doesn't happen again. We are very serious about our history and about what happened. And yet somehow somebody on the internet who is not from here and has never been here still managed to argue with me about it. So that was really fun. I love it when that happens.
I saw, and just I was about to say, and for context, but what he said was literally, oh, well, the context changes it. And it's like, no, asshole. Trump is literally telling you exactly what he's going to do. The only context with Trump is always, this is the only thing in my brain right now. So.
All right, James and the wonderful Alex, I'm going to throw one in here. And I'm going to say this, knowing fully well where I live and all the thing that's going on. But I seriously want to say a big fuck you to high school football coaches that teach civics and history, because the combination between them and the Daughters of Confederacy are why we have so many people who are historically on the small scale as far as locally, on the medium scale as far as nationally, and on the large scale globally, so fucking ignorant when it comes to history, social issues, political issues. And I will give you a perfect example because this is, I was near your neck of the woods, Alex. I mean, I was close. I was in Greece last month, and we went on a tour of Delos. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, oh my God, this is so great that they could actually trace what's going on to current day and how this developed in this area. So going on and on and on and on. So I'm expecting people are going to ask this tour guide, this professor, some great questions. This one American tourist, and James knows that when I go anywhere, I do anything to avoid being mistaken for an American. Because I don't want to be, and this is nothing against American travelers in general, but a good number of people who do travel from the United States pack their privilege with them, and they completely forget where they are. They think everything is centered around the United States. She asks, as this professor in Greek history is telling them about, well, this is how these people lived, and they had outdoor kitchens, And again, Delos, we're talking about 6,000 years in the past. If not more. This woman then says, oh, well, my ancestors used to cook outside. We had outdoor kitchens.
Oh my.
And the tour guide, as polite as she can be, I'm surprised she didn't curse her out in Greek, says, oh, well, where are your ancestors from? Or where are you from? The woman responds with, oh, we're from Georgia. My wife grabbed my arm to prevent me from saying anything to her about how fucking stupid that question was. Because I have a policy which is there are no stupid questions. But every now and then one comes up. She was trying to link the circumstances that her great grandparents or grandparents or whoever she considers ancestors, that the lie that they probably told her about, oh, we did this. I'm like, motherfucker, they weren't the ones that were cooking outside. It was somebody else. And they were cooking outside away from the house because they didn't want them in their home. But I'm like, you are so centered on your American identity that you don't see how shit happens in the rest of the world, to where people in this country can joke about a fucking dictatorship, but then not look at the historical examples of whatever area you are on the political spectrum. Authoritarianism is authoritarianism, no matter what. And to make the push that, well, circumstances are different. No, the circumstances are always the same with authoritarianism. We're going to scare the shit out of you with some stuff that we're going to go ahead and expand exponentially and make that seem like it's a problem, so we can go ahead and do something else that you're not going to pay attention to. I'm like, I don't give a shit if he's on your side or you're on his side. You know what? You're going to be expendable too, asshole. So anybody who I have a real problem, especially now with all the fucking red hats or the white diapers or whatever you want to call them, because that's what they're putting on their fucking ears now. But I have a really big problem with that cult, because you can't say, oh, we love freedom and we love this and that, and you suppress it everywhere else in the world, and you suppress it in your own country because you don't want to be uncomfortable. I'm sorry, I only got a couple of rants left before the show's over.
Oh, we're doing a couple in this episode. Fantastic. I love that.
Man.
Just a small note on what you said earlier. I'm so amused by this woman using the word ancestors. For one thing, because I always find it hilarious what Americans will consider their ancestors, whereas like your great-great-grandparents, maybe you personally didn't meet yours, but a lot of people when they're young, they do get to meet theirs. That's like pretty living history. That's not ancestors. Ancestors is just a word you're using to distance yourself because you realize that saying your family would sound a lot worse in context of what you're saying they did. Like, let's be clear on why we're using the word ancestors here. Your great-great-grandparents are not goddamn ancestors.
You're spot on.
I would also like to point out that I don't feel like Greece and Transylvania are that close to each other.
No.
Well, considering the fact that I can fly to Greece in 2 hours with $40, they're not that far either.
All right, I'll give you that. I just really wanted to pick on him, but you know.
I'm saying, like, when I was in Greece, I'm saying I was in that neck of the woods. I was in the Balkans. I was in that area.
It's not that far.
Jeez, James, God.
So Alex, let's bring this back for a minute. When you were on before, you did all 8 episodes of Cabinet of Curiosities, and it was an absolute blast and one of my favorite things we've done on here. And then you said, if I ever come back, I want to do the Twilight Zone movie.
Yes.
And then I hounded you for months and went, when can we do this? When can we do this? And here we are. But what is it about the Twilight Zone that you love so much, and why it was the chosen one?
I mean, for one thing, for me, it's also the feeling of surprise. Like, I know going in that I'm going to love every single thing I see that has anything to do with the Twilight Zone. Like, you just know you're in for something good. But also, for me, these are things that I saw when I was like a really small kid, and I barely remember any of it. In fact, this movie left me so surprised on several different levels, because no matter what I was expecting, they managed to go either to the side or further of that, which is fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted. And I know it's still one of those shows that, and one of those legacies, not shows, but yeah, it's one of those legacies that has always pushed boundaries. And when you do that in your own time, odds are people watching later are still going to find something boundary pushing about it. Like, the boundaries don't change that much over time. It's still going to speak to the audience now. It's still going to speak to what's happening in our world right now. And that's what I really love about it. I guess in a way that's what you hope as a writer and as a publisher. That's what you hope to achieve, that sort of timeless quality where you're saying something really wild in your own time, and 50 years later, 100 years later, somebody picks it up and goes, holy shit, this still applies. This is still super awesome and valid and surprising and fun right now. And that is what they did.
It's beautiful. I agree.
Yeah, from day one, because James, I'm sorry to cut you off, but a lot of people, when they'll talk about the Twilight Zone and they don't know the historical context behind a lot of it. Rod Serling wanted to talk about things like Emmett Till back when he was proposing this type of show, and the television networks. I'm sorry, not the censors. The networks didn't want to do it, so he did the one thing that creative people do. I'm going to tell you the story without telling you the story.
Yep.
And that, going back even to the first episode of the original series, you're sitting there thinking, like, this ain't about what you're telling me it's about.
Yep.
But if I'm not too tuned into what's going on, I'll think that this story, this wasn't the first episode, but the one that's coming to mind is the traveling salesman guy, or the sidewalk salesman. It's not about a guy selling little wares. It's about understanding what his life is about, and the fact that if he's gonna make a deal, he needs to understand what the deal is. What are the circumstances? What are the risks? What are all these things that are going on? And also the idea of he never had that big sale of a lifetime. His sale of a lifetime was convincing death not to take him. But then he realizes, no, you gave me what I wanted out of my life, so shit, take me to the great beyond. Like, I finally I achieved that thing I wanted. Whereas Serling couldn't bring in, hey, let's talk about racism. Let's talk about sexism. Let's talk about homophobia. Let's talk about all these things. So it was never like right in your face. It was always, you got to dig a little bit under the surface to get what he's talking about, or what any of the writers and the showrunners are talking about. But if you're paying attention, you will learn the lesson that goes beyond whatever the story is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All those things. I'm sorry, Alex, go ahead.
I'd say that for the time when he was doing this, he was even occasionally aggressive about it. But that is the beauty of it, that if you don't want the message, if you don't want the point, you can always just enjoy the story. Freaking magic.
Definitely. When did the Twilight Zone get so woke anyway? Oh,
When did
Kind of.
movies and TV shows get so woke?
they're ruining my childhood.
Yeah.
1959 when it first premiered. You know? Just saying.
Yeah. It is ballsy too. Like, you have to wonder, did he think about what might be the personal consequences to him? Did he worry about that? Did he plan for that? What did his plans for that look like? Because if you're doing this, either you have a very specific type of personality or you're going to plan for that to happen. Like, you're going to plan for some bad things.
Mm-hmm.
I think even then, being now definitely, but even then being a little bit famous could have been a lot of dangerous.
Oh yeah, even in the intro, like that famous quote that Rod Serling gives, which is, there's a fifth dimension behind what's known to man. It's a dimension of vast space, timeless. It's timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. And that in itself gives you that freedom, Alex, as far as that freedom from that speculation as to what are they really trying to do. Well, it's a sci-fi show. You look at Star Trek. When Gene Roddenberry created that, he's like, I'm creating this to show you exactly what society should be.
Mm-hmm.
It's a utopian socialist dream. Money is not used. People are doing things, pursuing science, pursuing the advancement of humanity and all these other planets just for the purpose of making things better.
We have rules on how we engage with other cultures and how much we're allowed to disturb them.
I mean, you have this anti-colonialist presentation of we don't get involved in all these other people. We'll observe, but we're not going to interfere. We're not going to intervene. We're going to treat them as these are societies, civilizations that when they want to talk to us, when they want to interact with us, great. But we're not pressuring anybody. Sure, the occasional rescue mission we get involved with, but we're not trying to dictate our morality. We're not trying to dictate our political structure, our economic system, and it goes against hundreds of years of imperialism and exploitation. And the way that sci-fi and horror sci-fi and horror, it's a thin line, a razor thin line that separates the two, because they're both talking about the possibility. One, the possibility of if your fear takes over, what's going to happen? Or the possibility of what is possible beyond whatever we currently know. And I didn't say which one was which because they're so interchangeable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, the brilliant and personal thing for me too is not to bring every discussion back to my dictatorship baggage, but oh my God, this girl with all her ex-dictators. But this thing of masking sort of the message in the story was a large part of the culture of Romania under dictatorship. One of our most famous bands who was playing during dictatorship, throughout and after, while we were, we weren't allowed to have certain lyrics, to say certain things. We couldn't have certain philosophies or discuss politics or discuss, other countries. There was a long list of things we could not discuss in our music. And so we have these like folk songs from the band Phoenix, which are like, oh, we are just hanging out in the shadow of the great bear, but at some point we're going to kill that great bear and escape from under his shadow. It's like, motherfuckers, they're not talking about a bear. I know they're talking about a bear, but you literally in Romanian, you spell the word bear, which is urs, as U-R-S. Just add an S to the end of that and you know what they're talking about. It's not even subtle. However, it's this whole thing of anybody who doesn't want to hear the message doesn't have to hear the message. And everybody else who might need to is going to maybe feel a little less alone. You know?
Yeah.
Like there is some hope out there. It's not all dark and bleak. And I think that's a lot of what Twilight Zone and shows like Star Trek did too. It could have been, like, Star Trek could have been a show about going around conquering other planets. Can you imagine how different a show that would have been?
Oh man. I don't think I would have seen as many episodes.
Definitely.
I would have been like, this sucks.
No, it really didn't fit because you're talking about to go back to the original series. You're talking about Rod Serling. First year the show comes out, he wins an Emmy for writing it, right? Mm-hmm. So they're already getting the respect of their peers, but they're a hit television show as well. So you have an audience that is eating this up. Mm-hmm. And it's not the same, I'll just call it dribble. It's not the same dribble as what you would find with Donna Reed or Leave It to Beaver. I won't even say Lucy, because Lucy, there was a lot of messaging in that show that was in the subtext. But it wasn't one of those shows that was, here's a happy family, here's some great things that are going on. What Rod Serling demonstrated was that gap between white America and everybody else, right? Because what you're getting as far as regular television was happy family, happy white family living in the suburbs, white picket fence, 2.5 kids, a dog, maybe a cat as well. But it's that professional family. The dad works as a doctor, or he's an attorney, or he happens to have this management job with all these benefits. So you're seeing like all the good stuff that's there. Whereas if people who are watching those television shows that are in those marginalized areas are like, my family doesn't look like that. Mm-hmm. It's not happening. Oh my gosh, you're worried about missing Chip's Boy Scout meeting because I don't know, you have a union meeting that same night. Oh God, what are we going to do? Whereas people that are watching this show who are poor, who are marginalized, who aren't having that experience, are thinking like, well, shit, I want to see something else. Mm-hmm. It just provided that opportunity where you had, a changing cast from week to week. So you're seeing snippets of other people's lives. Like I mentioned the salesman guy. He's living in a walk-up apartment, or at least walk-up home, in an area that seems like it's is going through some type of economic depression or economic destitution, and he's just trying to make it. And you have people who are watching, they're like, holy shit, I'm trying to make it myself, and this guy's working every day of his life in order to have some sort of meaning. Why the hell do I work? Why would I work my entire... So you have these questions that are now coming up on the screen that people have been asking themselves for decades. Like, why are things the way they are? Or one of my favorite ones, holy shit, pig people. I'm the oddity here. And now you get that sense of, you have to throw something out in somebody's face so blatantly to where, I'm a normal human, everybody else is pig people, but if they're all pig people, they're now the normal, and I'm the outcast, so I'm the one who's weird, I'm the one who's going to be focusing on, I'm the one who's going to be targeted, I'm the one who's going to be attacked, because I am now the minority, I am the marginalized. Mm-hmm. And you get enough people to see that message, they might now take that energy and put it into the civil rights movement, which Rod Serling was a supporter of the civil rights movement, a big one. I mean, he gave money, he gave resources, and he had a wonderful nickname, or I'm sorry, a wonderful term that was used as a slur against him because of the way in which he was reaching out to organizations and getting people to have some sense of equality. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. Or just some sense of citizenship.
Do I want to know what they called him?
I was just thinking, do I ask? I don't think I want to ask.
Some circles, at least from some of the stuff I read, obviously he was called a socialist, right? Mm-hmm. But the other ones was, N-word lover was another one.
That was the one I expected, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because by 64, the show's off the air. I think it had a syndicated run, but it's off the air. And you have the Civil Rights Act that's passed in 64, the Voting Rights Act that's passed in 65. And, he's still working. He's still producing stuff. He's still involved in things. But you didn't have that same punch. You didn't have that same ability to punch as you did with the first. I'm sorry, with the show while it was on. Mm-hmm. So you could be right there in people's living rooms, and they may be watching as the war progresses. They may be watching the nightly news about, the Vietnam War, and I would have loved to have seen something from Rod Serling, or at least from Twilight Zone, that was running concurrent with that, because the best social discourse media that was created was MASH. And that was after, that was, I guess there was a little bit concurrent, but it's after the Korean War, but it's about Vietnam, and people really put two and two together and like, holy shit, this is actually talking about what's going on right now, especially the bystanders in hell speech that Hawkeye gives, which is, it's like, there are no bystanders in hell, aside from some of the top brass. Everybody here is a bystander and is a victim to what has been taking place. Now, I butchered the quote, but he talks about how, like, you, me, everybody who's here, other than the people who are making decisions, are all bystanders. There are no bystanders in hell. We didn't make the decisions to do that. Somebody else put us in those positions, and they're the ones who should pay. Great line that's delivered, timeless, and sadly, it's something that's going to remain timeless because we're always going to have that issue.
It's amazing.
It's going to remain for a while, for sure. I want to say maybe not for always, but for a long time still, at least. We're not going to see the end of the times in which that's going to be an applicable line, for sure.
Unless we nuke everything. That's the only way.
Oh, that's an option. Wait, will we have that power? I didn't realize they gave us that power.
If I had that power, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So I gave up on Project Human a while ago.
When you said that this was the last recording, how literally did you mean that?
James, it's going to be like Treehouse of Terror, where I have the vision of you blowing up the entire town, and I have to shoot you, and I inadvertently lead to us having the nuclear holocaust.
Alex, you're safe for a little bit, because I've waited 5 years to talk about Silence of the Lambs, and we haven't recorded the final episode yet. So, a couple weeks at least. But with that said, I think it's amazing how Don's entire discussion just now rolls perfectly into the first full segment of the movie. Obviously, there's the piece before this, but we'll probably just wrap that up into the ending. But Time Out, the first real segment, it's all about racism and bigotry and war. And I thought you did an amazing job building a segue here, Don, whether you meant to or not.
I'll say that I meant to. Yeah.
Excellent. What a professional. 5 years of experience has paid off.
Says you.
No, but legitimately, Don, I know this is your wheelhouse. So if you want to take section one, please do.
I ruined my child's viewing of this because what I did was I explained everything that was going on as we were watching.
No.
I need to explain to her that Nazis are bad, right? I was translating some of the stuff that the Germans were, the little bit of German I retained over the years. Mm-hmm. I was explaining what they were saying and why they were doing it, and this whole idea of this guy is fully entitled. Like, he is the guy who'll be running around, Bill Connor, and I have to keep saying Bill because you can interchange this with a very famous sheriff, and I forgot the other title that he had. This title was like Director of Public Safety or some shit. He was basically like Joe Arpaio in Phoenix times 20. His name was Bull Connor. He was the guy who was ordering the fire department to dispense their fire hoses on black marchers or just black people in general and terrorize them in the 60s in Birmingham. But Bill Connor is a great name to choose because you're getting there, but you know what? We're not right there for people who aren't sure about who Bill Connor, who Bull Connor is. You get an understanding of he is an ultra racist. Bill Connor in this segment of the film, is a dyed-in-the-wool, red hat, I want to make America great again type like Bill Connor would have been storming the Capitol on January 5th. Not on January 6th. He would have gone in early because he's that racist. He would have gone in a day earlier.
He's in line like a new Star Wars movie.
Yeah. He's got his camping chair out there and everything.
I was going to say camping out there with his little sleeping bag and his little umbrella, his little red umbrella.
Make sleep great again.
And say, this wasn't planned. This was just a regular event for all of us. You get this first indicator because he's going in and he's complaining about how he didn't get this job, right? And everything else is everybody else's fault. And this is what I'm going to say to anybody who's listening to the show. And if you happen to be a bigoted piece of garbage and you still listen to this show, thank you for the downloads. But we'll gladly accept you. You know, we'll gladly accept you going and listen to Joe Rogan instead. But he walks in and his complaint is, oh, they gave this promotion to this person. Oh, they gave this person promotion to this person. And I hadn't watched the movie in a while. And I forgot some of the little nuances, the little throwaway things. When the waitress comes up, I always remember him trying to flirt with her, but because I was so focused on everything else that happens in this piece.
Oh no, he flat out goes for it, like way beyond trying to flirt with her. Like one of the first things that struck me was he immediately goes for the anti-Semitism plus sexism plus sexual harassment combo. And like I instantly stood up and went, holy shit. And then he went for the racism and I went, holy shit. I could not believe how far they were going with this character. And that was interesting because I had to check myself and go, you know, this is your privilege speaking. Just because you're not around people who are like this often or almost ever doesn't mean they're not still here.
And I mean, if anything, it's proven that they've been here and they haven't gone away. But when that scene popped up, you know, again, I like to use a lot of these movies, a lot of things as a learning opportunity for my kid. And so I said, you know, if a man ever talks to you like that and puts his hand on you, break his fucking fingers.
Smack that motherfucker, absolutely.
Break his fingers.
I will bail you out. I will figure it out after. Exactly. I will visit you in prison if that's what needs to happen. Smack that motherfucker.
We ain't going to prison. We're going to make it to the border.
Perfect.
But he's just like, it's all everybody else's fault. The world is changing. And that is a direct response to, you know, the California versus Bakke case where an individual sued the University of California system because he didn't get into med school. And the idea that, oh my gosh, an unqualified black person got this seat instead of me. Now, Bakke still went to medical school. He just didn't get accepted to this one. Mm-hmm. So Supreme Court, in, you know, what the Supreme Court did, they didn't necessarily define that the university was wrong. Mm-hmm. But they didn't necessarily define that he deserved. It was just an issue of like the admissions process wasn't very, very clear. So a lot of people use that case to say, see, affirmative action doesn't work. It's not for this. It's not for this. No, you're talking about the way in which it's like the Trump immunity case. It didn't say Trump didn't have immunity. It didn't say Trump had immunity. It just simply said if this can be classified as an official duty, he gets immunity from it because it's presidential duties. People ran with it, was like, he can do whatever he wants. I'm like, no, that's not what the fuck they said. Joe Biden can't do whatever who's president at this time of this recording. He can't do everything he wants. So it's a misapplication of what's going on. So what Bill Connor does is he assumes, because of programs like affirmative action or the equal rights movement or anything like that, that somehow a job that he's been waiting for isn't his because he paid his dues. He's a white guy. And he even said, well, he goes even further. He says, damn it, I'm an American. Doesn't that mean something anymore?
Yeah. And
you will see a good number of people in the United States who are non-white. They won't refer to themselves as American first. Mm-hmm. They can simply say, you know, I'm black, I'm Mexican, I'm Latino, I'm Filipino, I'm this, right? Because American has always been something that was denied to them as part of their identity. Yep. It was something that you could aspire to be, but you're not going to be. So if you look at the default setting of these American identities and say, oh, you know, Americans do such and such. And then people from those marginalized communities are like, no, the fuck we don't.
Yep.
A certain segment of Americans do, but we don't. But he goes into this whole thing of, I didn't get this job because this. It's the blacks. It's the Jews. It's this. And I guarantee if they updated this from roughly 41 years ago, trans, LGBTQIA plus, which trans is part of that, obviously, that would take a bigger place in here. You would also have women's issues taking a bigger role as well, because you're seeing this as we're recording. The presumptive nominee for the Democratic Party is a Black and Asian woman.
Yeah.
They have already, we aren't even a full week into her accepting the possibility of being the nominee, because the convention hasn't happened yet. We haven't even gotten that far into a week. Within a day, there were people that were calling her, whether they're in politics or in media or just pieces of shit in general. They said things like, well, she's a DEI hire.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And here, for those of you who don't know the acronym, DEI means diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yep.
It just means, here are the things that we need to work on. Here are some programs that we could do to implement it. So if you happen to be disabled, do we have ramps for all the buildings? Are they accessible for you? If you're visually impaired, do we have something to help you? If you're to go with disabilities. Do we have disability resources in general? Do we have something for working parents? If we look at our enrollment data, are we serving all these groups as best as we can? It has nothing to do with quotas, because at the University of Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, the Black population is around 35-36% of the state. The University of Mississippi, a public university, the demographics for Black students is around 11 to 12% for the University of Mississippi. And Mississippi State, one of the other public universities here, a big public university, their numbers are about the same. This is including everybody, all the student body.
Yep.
You're talking about 11 to 12% are Black in a state that's almost 40% Black. So somebody would look at that data and say, like, how can we get more Black students to come here?
Yep. Because clearly they're out there, like clearly that is a segment that should be here. And the only reason they're not is, why? That's something that a lot of us presses also have to be doing, going, okay, is the person who's in charge of making decisions maybe subconsciously biased against certain kinds of stories? And I'm assuming that's the same thing that a person who is in charge of deciding who they let into a university, because past a certain point, everybody has the same perfect scores, right?
Right.
Is it possible they're biased against certain types of cultures, certain types of essays, certain voices, something to look into? Yeah, those are practices that a lot of people are doing. And it has nothing to do with, we absolutely must have a specific number, because if we were doing that, we would have a much higher number. Like it would be 33%, it wouldn't be 12.
Oh, most definitely it wouldn't be. But I want to say this before I do forget. A lot of people with this segment, when they're mentioning or talking about the Twilight Zone movie, they always mention about, Vic Morrow died making this movie. And for anybody who's listening, I want to point out there were 3 people who died.
Yep.
It was Vic Morrow and then 2 children because of, I will say allegedly, because of John Landis's alleged oversights and ambition, because he was never proven guilty. Because of his oversight and his ambition, allegedly, his decisions led to the death of 3 people, which I think is another aspect to look at this film of how much we want to tell the story that we don't pay attention to the way in which we're taking care of people. And I tie that into Bill Connor's story, because he's looking at all the things that are affecting him.
Yes.
He's never looking at the way that things are affecting other people. Now,
yes, absolutely.
If you updated this film, I would have gotten rid of the Vietnam part. I would have had a better discussion, a better analysis of what was taking place for Asian Americans themselves. But for him, it's an issue. For his experience, it's a Jewish person in Nazi Germany, a Black person in Jim Crow South who's going to be lynched, and a Vietnamese. I guess I'm assuming he would have been Viet Cong, but a Vietnamese individual who was just out there, right? As far as like what his outward appearance is for everybody else. I think this is one of those moments in which the Twilight Zone as a film, and partially because of John Landis, we're gonna punch you in the face with every last thing we can, so you can't ignore that this is what's going on. If this had been one of those traditional body swap movies or something like that, he would have lived as a Jewish person, as a black person, as a woman, or any other marginalized group, and having to directly respond to what's taking place, as opposed to what the hell's going on? What's going on? I'm a white man. What's going on? What's going on? Because those first two portions, that's kind of his reaction. But the third one is when he kind of is supposed to have that redemption. It's him saving these two Asian children from the U.S. troops. And that's the scene in which he gets killed. But the way they wrap this story up is he never escapes this world, these circumstances that other people have to go through that he can easily ignore because of the privilege that he has. And the nicest thing that happens to him is that the gentleman at the other table asks him if there's a problem. All these racial slurs. And I will tell you this: that's pretty much how it would have happened. It would have been, is there a problem over here? No, our friend is okay. Get your friend under control because he doesn't need to be saying these things. I'm going to kick his ass, but there may be somebody else who will, and it's going to look bad. So talk to your buddy.
I always assumed that this segment was a, like a little try at trying to make American Werewolf in the Vietnam War. Was I wrong on that?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I couldn't resist.
I have to admit, I guess maybe it's just me being me. If people have followed our other episodes, they probably know I don't always catch on to things the fastest, but that's all right because I get there eventually. I think in the first segment, I was on the same page as him. I wasn't sure what the hell was going on. And the fun thing about the first segment for me is that at that point, I was still assuming that he could have easily been persecuted by the Nazis for being American, because that's a reality of what could have happened. He was an American without the correct paperwork. He had no business being there. And for me, that was already enough. I was like, okay, this must be what's happening. He himself was transported here, and he's being persecuted for being this random American in the middle of the night with no papers and no reason for being there. It wasn't until the second segment that I went, oh, hang on. These people all see him as somebody else. And then I thought, maybe to some extent, the show was speaking to people like me who didn't necessarily come equipped with all of the tools to immediately get the point of this. No shade to us. We are worthy of watching movies too. And maybe it was a way of saying, yeah, this is how it goes. These people, the most hateful people, are going to see you as whatever they want to see you. Maybe that was meant to be a revelation for some people. Right. And I found that really fun and interesting.
I actually would like that. I think that would be a really cool ending for this, that not so much experiencing through the eyes of everyone else, but doing the you're an American thing that you were just talking about. That would be amazing, because it's something that is so ingrained in you that he's not even paying attention to it. He's using it as I'm an American, and like outside of that, he's not thinking how anybody else views that. And I think that would be a really powerful, cool ending today. As far as catching on right away or whatever, I mean, all of these are based on episodes that were in the original series. So I pretty much knew where it was going as soon as it started the first time I saw it, because I'd seen the series so many times. But,
fancy.
It was drilled into me by my older cousin to watch it all the time. But in the original, it only focuses on the war part. It doesn't have the other parts. There's just that segment of the story. Okay. And I don't know. I liked this better because he has to go through different things. But then, like, when Don was talking about how it would be today, I was like, this would become the whole movie. It would take forever. Have to be
Well, I mean, yeah,
at one point.
you could though make the whole movie with just this story because there is a lot to explore. But I guess in a way it lets you think about that too, right? As the audience, it lets you go, wow, I wonder what it would be like to have to live for months in that place.
Well, there was an episode of, I shouldn't say episode, the film, I think it was the third Tales from the Hood. They have a segment like this, but it's a museum. Or I'm sorry, it's a human zoo. You realize, spoiler alert, you realize it's a human zoo, but it's this racist, bigoted piece of garbage. You think that he's living in a basement, but you realize he's on display because he's a relic of the past. Mm-hmm. And the whole thing is, you get this understanding of he's not going to learn who he is from the outside. He's not going to learn who he is from the inside. He's just going to have to live with this. And you have other people that are seeing, this racist piece of garbage. They're watching him, through like a viewfinder, and then they watch him like as they're passing by the exhibit, and you see him like making all these over the top, ridiculous, racist statements and sexist statements for that matter. And you see how comical and how damaging for that matter, but how comical racism is, because you're like, where the hell did you get these beliefs? Yeah. Like James may have heard this one, but I'm going to say this one because it's always been a funny one to me. There was a racial stereotype about Black people not swimming. And the rationalization that people gave, racist people gave, and clueless people gave was, well, Black people can't swim because they have an extra bone in their foot.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, that was a common misbelief, or I guess misconception, was that Black people had an extra bone in their foot. It's the same same bone in the foot that makes them run fast. It inhibits their ability to swim.
Wow.
You know what the reality of why a good number of Black people didn't learn how to swim? Because in urban settings, when there were public pools, there were only certain days that Black people were allowed to swim. And then second, when the suburban expansion took place, a lot of these public pools got cemented in or destroyed. And now you had, white middle class families that were living in these areas like this, the 1950s television shows. And the selling point for a good number of these homes in these restrictive communities was having a swimming pool.
Yeah. And the vast majority of them were not having their Black friends over or having their kids over. Absolutely. It's access and privilege like everything else. Totally.
If you grew up in the country, as far as the rural areas, you probably know how to swim because you would have a pond, a creek, a lake, or whatever you could go into. But if you were in an urban or suburban setting and you didn't have those resources, where are you going to swim? Your bathtub?
And then it's not on us because Black people don't like to swim anyway, so we don't need to provide that, right?
Yeah, that's how it goes, isn't it? Yep. Well, I mean, why am I shocked at this foot bone thing? Because it sounds absolutely ridiculous, but then I think, I actually knew people, and there probably are people who whole hog believe that women have one less rib than men do.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, people still believe that?
That is fully a thing, absolutely. 100% there's still people who think that's a thing.
Oh my God.
And like, how do you even... It's hard to even begin to have a conversation when somebody's that far off. I guess the best thing you can possibly do is start telling them a parable, telling them a story, because how do you talk human to somebody who has that sort of belief?
Wait, I want to go back because I'm going to start using that phrase from now on. How do I talk human to you?
Sometimes sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you just have to break into a metaphor for a motherfucker to understand what you're saying.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think we just designed like 4 t-shirts right there, Alex. How do I talk human to you? Sometimes you have to break out a metaphor for a motherfucker. Those are all good shirts.
Coming to the Tenebrous store soon.
Yes. You said it. You claim it. It's yours.
Hell yeah. No, I'm always blown away by stuff like the like you were just talking about, the black people don't swim or whatever, and how white people just made excuses to not have to do anything. And that doesn't surprise me. It amazes me that they're still doing it today. Everything is always like, oh well, this segment of people, whoever it is, wouldn't want to be involved in this. So we don't need to put any work into making it available to them, inviting them, making them feel welcome, when it's really just, we want you to stay the fuck out. And I'd be more comfortable with people who just said, I don't want black people at my party, because at least I know exactly where you stand. And you're owning it, so you understand you're a piece of shit. And that's better to me.
You mentioned like 2 stories that I could give you right now, but I won't. I'll give them to you later. But yeah, it's almost as if you would rather, because those guys are sitting at the table with Bill, right? Yeah. They're chuckling with some of the stuff he's saying. It's just that he's starting to cross that line of, here's funny racism, here's Bill just being Bill. And here's like, do you want those guys to come over here and kill us? You know, people have guns and knives on them. You know, it like that was what you were hearing. I mean, I'm sorry, what I was picking up from watching some other stuff, some other weird paranoid behavior from people. But they're sitting with him. There's never this moment, and this is kind of the misstep, because there's so much focus on Bill. There's the misstep of even addressing his friends, because the biggest person, the most impactful person that can stop you from being an asshole are the people in your circle.
Yeah.
They will simply, here, I'll go back to the bear and the bear and the man thing. The reason why so many people were saying, you know, so many cishet women were saying the bear over men, was guys will go around talking about, oh, you know, it's a guy's job to protect women. And now we've turned it into, oh, somebody's attacking you. Like, you have to be attacking. You know, I have to see something attacking you and I will respond and stop that. But these are the same people that won't check their friends for, hey man, I'm gonna go slip some in this chick's drink.
Yep.
Or, hey, I'm gonna get a little handsy with the waitress. You know, they're not gonna tell you they're doing it, but you know that they're possibly doing it. And because you don't say anything, you basically condoned what they're doing.
Yep. You know, the hardest thing for guys in those kinds of groups to do is when one of them goes and shoots his shot with a waitress, which he shouldn't be doing to begin with in that position. He shoots his shot with the waitress. He comes back. He got shot down and he goes, well, you know what? She was a fat, ugly bitch anyway. Yeah. The hardest thing for men to do right then is to go, dude, you are out of line.
Yep.
And unfortunately, yes, that's not as serious as laying hands on somebody, sure, but that's the starting point of all the rest of it, isn't it? Because how many times do you get to talk that way about a woman before you start to do something about it?
Yeah.
And that's the kicker. Nobody ever thinks that it's important to take a stance in that moment, but that's the start of everything.
Well, and it's also that aspect that, I'm not going to say the majority, but there are a good number of men who see women as property. Mm-hmm. And that's what Bill does in this scene. It's, here's something I can acquire. Here's something I can conquer.
He doesn't even think about it. There's not even a moment of like, there's no consideration whatsoever. It's just basically a reflex to him. That's the hilarious thing about it. Like, he's not actively trying to do anything mean. That's just what he thinks the world looks like. And that's just his normality. It's that simple to him.
Man.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that was great.
The other thing that
I was like, I can't follow that.
The other thing that I thought was really interesting about him, and probably deliberate, I guess, I have to assume, because these shows are so smart, I have to assume it's all deliberate, is that he's doing this whole spiel about, these other people are taking our jobs, right? That's the condensed version of it. All these other people are taking our jobs. But at no point is he actually concerned about the job of anybody else at that table.
Nope.
It is always just about his. At no point does he break out into a speech about you guys. You didn't get promoted then, and you should have gotten that. And I've been watching you work so hard, and you didn't get that. Never goes into anything like that. It is always only about him in the singular. And that's such a stark contrast to what one would assume the speech is about, right? If you're giving that they're taking our jobs, you would assume that that is a concern for the community. At no point is it actually a concern for the community. It is entirely 100% just for his own benefit.
I hadn't even thought about him dismissing his friends, or at least not including them and thinking about how
they don't exist basically in his world.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I hope I never become that kind of asshole.
Oh, you've always been that kind of asshole. No, I'm just kidding.
He took our jobs. No, and Alex, you bring up many fine points. Because to say good point, but it's you bring up many fine points because you see this in political dialogue, no matter what country you're talking about. If we just limit it to Europe and North America, because I'm going to include Mexico, the United States, and Canada, you have an in-group that will always try to create an out-group. It's if something did not happen well for me, I deserve everything that happens to me, every good thing that happens to me. But the other person only got it because of X, right? Mm-hmm. And you didn't take advantage of that fear and everything and try and get some support off of it. Because that would have been a great opportunity to see where his friend sat, which is Bill, not Bill, Tommy, you didn't get a promotion last year. They promoted, some Japanese guy, something to draw that they're all being somehow, quote unquote, screwed over by minorities, right? And you see that now, or I should say, you've seen this for decades, for that matter. You see that, especially now in the U.S. labor market, where if somebody gets their job and they happen to be part of a marginalized community, there will be people who question whether or not they got that job because they are a quote unquote minority or marginalized. And it's never a thing of here's my CV, here are my qualities, here are my skills, here's my job experience. It will immediately be, well, they only got in that school because, they were Native American. And if they got into the school for being Native American, I would say, God, damn it, good. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I don't care. Because you know what? Even if they got in there because they happen to be of a certain group, you still have to do the fucking work when you're there.
Yep.
Exactly.
If anything, it's going to be harder for you.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing it nonstop with Harris. Everything is, she had to give 1,000 blowjobs to get there. Last I checked, if anybody was going to get 1,000 blowjobs, it would have been Clinton, and I can't imagine that never mind. Anyway, but
first of all, giving blowjobs is hard fucking work, slay queen.
But
second of all, that's none of anybody's business.
I don't understand how they think that everything that she did as jobs, being a prosecutor or attorney general or whatever else, sure, none of that counted, but those blowjob skills were amazing.
Oh, yeah. No, she was terrible at all of those, but nobody noticed. Nobody.
It's all unfair because that becomes the accepted thing, right? She only got her, and I'm saying the general she only got her job because she slept with the boss.
Yep.
She only got her job because she blew this guy or did this or whatever. And my response whenever somebody says it is, one, how do you know that's what took place? Two, if a blowjob or sex did take place, weren't there two people? One person was in a position of power, the other person was not.
Yep.
And then three, you're still going to have to do the fucking job. So if they're not good at the job, guess what's going to happen? They're going to be gone. It's going to be very evident pretty soon.
Absolutely.
It just blows my mind that that's the place they immediately have to go. It's I don't know. I take in the work I put into insults and the way that I pull like all this research about somebody into an insult. And I can't imagine just going,
Don't go for the
she
easiest
sucked a bunch
shit
of dicks. Like, la.
I mean, the other, and this has nothing to do with her specific case. Like, I have absolutely no idea what this woman did with her life, and bless her, whatever she did. But the other really brutal thing about this, and this is going to be some like deep fucking woman lore, but it's that I have seen this happen a lot of times where women who are incredibly qualified, who should be getting that job, who should probably have had the job of the boss in charge of that job, to be honest, haven't gotten it because they're women, and showing some tit or flirting with some idiot is part of what you have to do and part of what you end up doing in order to get the bare minimum of the recognition that you should have gotten. And this is very real, and this happens. So even if somebody did have to give somebody else a blowjob to get in that position, sometimes that happens because they deserved that position anyway, and motherfuckers were keeping her away from it.
Yep.
And that is fucking real. So there's like so many layers of depth to this discussion. And the reality of this like unicorn myth where a woman who is completely unqualified and terrible at her job gets to have a high ranking position purely, solely based on the fact that she slept with somebody. I don't think that happens as often as people think it happens.
Right.
I think it happens a lot more often that a woman who is incredibly qualified has to do things that she shouldn't have to do in order to get the recognition that she already deserves. And I'm pretty sure that happens to all marginalized folks across the board, where they have to press the flesh and shake hands with somebody they completely disagree with. They have to pretend to be there against their own interests. They have to be the most acceptable, publicly acceptable version of themselves. They have to do all sorts of things just to get the bare minimum of what was owed to them to begin with.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
I guess I'm
so
just
in defense of blowjobs. Here I am.
It'll be my autobiography in defense of blowjobs. No,
great title.
Not to give Dave Chappelle credit or platforming, but he had a really good joke back in 2000. I think. I mean, he's had some good jokes, but he had a really good joke in 2000. Sorry, Dave Chappelle fans, I apologize. He was talking about, all these people are coming out against Clinton because he said, what do you guys know about it, Clinton? What do you know about it? He had a blowjob in the White House. Okay. Monica Lewinsky gave him a blowjob. Great. Some of you are giving blowjobs and it wasn't the president. So I think you need to shut the fuck up. It's just one of those things where it's like, why are you shaming the person? I mean, not that he directly said this, but it's like, why are you shaming the person who is actually the victim? Why are you taking your energy to say that we should attack this woman being involved with this man who was, 40 years her senior at that time or 30 years her senior at that time? Oh, God, who is in a position of power, like, that's as close to absolute power as you get as being the president. But she's the one who should be blamed, right? But anyway, the other thing is, let me be honest with you. For a lot of cishet men, it comes down to, I don't have the ability to use that power. And if I did, that's exactly what I would do, is I would make somebody give me a blowjob for a promotion. Because it's not just them going to and blaming the women and saying or accusing the women of doing that. It's also them telling on themselves, like, if I was in position, I'd be getting a blowjob from the secretary. I'd be doing this. I'm like,
totally.
You're revealing what you actually would do if you had the power, as opposed to the reality of the situation, which is more likely than not that didn't, the stuff that this person's being accused of didn't happen. And even if it did, you're in a toxic workplace. Go find another job.
So
Totally.
we're like,
Not only would these guys absolutely do exactly that, but then they would judge the woman for participating because it's
Yes.
that whole she's a whore if she sleeps with me and she's a whore if she doesn't sleep with me scenario, which is so fucking frequent. Like that is a real thing. I have seen that. I have experienced that. That is very real.
it's crazy.
Oh.
So we're like an
Super
hour and
weird.
15 minutes in and still on segment 1. So
We're going to need 4 different episodes for this.
That's okay. The other two parts of this episode aren't as, I'm sorry, in my opinion, they're not as deep as the first one.
I mean, I think segment 3, where there's an authoritarian, is.
I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying for me, they're not as impactful.
So okay, let's hit kick the can. So my main thing with this really fast is once again, this was an original episode in the series, and it's one of my favorites. I don't know if you guys have each seen the original episode, but that one, the main difference is that the change is permanent, and and in this one it's temporary, and there is this bleak moment of one guy did not believe and couldn't change, and he's left behind while all the others become children and go their way, right? And man, that always hit me so hard. And yet I watched this and I absolutely love like how it's about sharing magic with others and how it's about bringing that joy to everybody. And this is the one where I truly love both versions of the story. And I need both versions of the story. And I find that fascinating about myself. I love the bleak and I love the pure magic. And if that doesn't sum up my time in horror world, I don't know what does. But that's what I wanted to say. Yeah, go ahead.
It is such a strangely sweet and pure episode, isn't it? I kept expecting that it was going to take a very bad turn, and it does get occasionally heartbreaking, like you said. Like there is this moment of sadness, but it is a strangely sweet episode. And hilariously, I don't think it was by far my favorite. However, I watched this with a couple of other people. We made a little evening of it, and it happened to be everybody else's favorite. And I love that because I think, it's nice. Whatever you need in your life, maybe this is it at that moment. I kind of thought it was, I wished for it to go darker the whole time. I wished for something stranger to happen.
They were selling souls.
I don't know. I don't really know what I was thinking would happen, because at some point by halfway, I was like, no, I give up. There's no way I'm guessing what's going on in this one. And I wouldn't have. I was just, okay, I'm along for the ride now because I have no idea where this is going. Because I guess the last thing I would have expected was for it to be sweet and wholesome.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's kind of fascinating. Like, yeah, you should have a surprise, like a left fielder like that for people like me who expect everything to have the weirdest and darkest turn possible. Because in a way, if you're never expecting anything good and sweet and wholesome, then that is the weird thing, right? That is the surprise. And I like that. I super respect that.
Well, I mean, I feel like, all 4 of these were original episodes and they're all slightly different. I do feel like the movie overall is sweeter and nicer and more hopeful than the show is. In almost every one of these, I think maybe 20,000 Feet is the only one where it doesn't really overly change. But the first one's all about seeing things through other people's eyes, and even though it ends dark, it still is such an interesting lesson, right? And it's very much about seeing things through other people's eyes, as I just said, since I'm repeating myself. But also just like that is hopeful in itself, even though it doesn't end well for him. Like it's still, I don't know, it's a good lesson for everybody watching. And then this one is very, very hopeful and happy and very Steven Spielberg. And I don't know, it's just so great. And then the third one originally ends with the whole town still like being under his control, and in this one it's more hopeful.
Who does it?
Like teaches him a lesson, and while it's still kind of ambiguous, it could have a happy ending where he's learning to use his powers. And I find that fascinating overall with the movie, that I don't know if it was because it was for an even more mainstream audience, or if it was just the way each director came into it, or what. But it just feels so much more hopeful overall, was my point.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's Spielberg, if anything, because you had that, and what was it, Amazing Stories that he had, and I think there was another series kind of like that. Like, I loved watching those because it was a healthy mix of be careful what you wish for, and a mixed with, hey, things will get better. You know, that was kind of like the mix between the episodes or the stories that were on there. But I didn't mean to dismiss like the second and third. I just mean as far as like I've always connected more with that first one because I think about how to put somebody else in somebody else's shoes, especially when I'm teaching or talking about situations. But the second one I think is a good good segue, because it's still kind of that whole how people see you. And what we have, at least in Western society, I'll just pick on the U.S., we dispose of the elderly.
Yeah.
There's no way of saying it other than that. But in general terms, we dispose of the elderly at a certain point. You've hit your expiration date. And I don't mean as far as your death. I mean your usefulness.
Yes.
There's the way, I can't remember the one guy's name, but his family, like every week, it's like, oh, can I come home? He's expecting not to just have a visit. But
oh God, that was heartbreaking. That part was absolutely brutal. Oh my goodness.
As a kid, it did not hit me. When I got older, I went, fuck you.
Yeah.
Fuck you. Because I have a decent relationship with my parents, and they both know if they needed, they could come stay with me. But it's one of those things of like, you say that, but then when you get to that position, that son may have said the same thing, which, oh yeah, Pop, we'll get a room for you. We'll do this for you. We'll do this. Yeah. And you have a sense of not necessarily guilt, but you have that fatherly kind of, this character. You have that fatherly sense from him of, holy shit, he probably made all these sacrifices for his family. I'm sure he probably went to war. He did all this shit. And he doesn't want to be with these strangers. He wants to be with his family. He's older. He's dying. He's getting to this point of his life where it's like, I want to be able to enjoy my grandkids and be around them. That didn't make sense. That didn't hit me as a kid. But as an adult, it immediately went to, oh my God, he's being thrown away. He's a piece of trash. Like, he's worthless. Like, he's not. And then you see that glimpse of the people inside the retirement home where it's really mundane. It's drab. It's boring. It's mundane because the nurses are kind of like, it's Tuesday. Here are your pills, everybody. All right. Enjoy the TV show. And we'll be back in an hour. It seems very routine as far as like, we're not going to do anything. And there's that warning that's given about, oh, don't get these people excited about this. Oh, they don't need to be doing any of this stuff. Don't talk to them about this. As if, this is my favorite thing. I don't know if I've expressed it to you, Alex, but I've expressed it to James and other people. My favorite thing to do is treat people who are considered the elderly like regular fucking people. It's one of my favorite things. It's not like, oh my gosh, you look so beautiful for 80 years old. How about she just looks beautiful? Yep. Or he looks handsome? It becomes one of those things where you're like, why are you talking to them like they're not people? And it's also the same thing with which again I have to laugh about. And I get onto my mom about. I'm like, Mom, I have no problem mentioning sex around older people. She's like, oh, but you need to be respectful. I was like, Mom, you think those old people aren't fucking in a retirement home? Well, they're still. Why do you think STD rates are so high in the 70+ community in the United States? They got a hold of Viagra and Blue Chew, and they will not stop fucking each other.
Yep.
That's not true.
Ironically, to this episode, we treat the elderly like children. That's exactly what we do. The way we talk to them, around them, everything, exactly like inconvenienced children. That is what happens. And it's super tough seeing that from so many different perspectives as an adult, where that whole segment of the elderly guy who wants to go home, and his son who probably promised he would and keeps backing out on that promise, and his daughter-in-law who looks like she feels miserable about it and still doesn't do anything. That entire dynamic is just heartbreaking, and so you have to pause a minute and really bask in how heartbreaking that is, probably for everybody, because you have to think that, yeah, it's easy to make the assumption that this son is just an asshole who doesn't want to take care of his dad. But there are more difficult assumptions we could also be making, because we could easily assume that this family is not well off. We could easily assume that there's some sort of real problem preventing them from doing this. We could assume that there's physically not enough space, that there's some sort of problem with the kids, that there's, there are a million things even darker, I could say, that would be very good reasons why you wouldn't take this man home. And it's like, it's heartbreaking from this elderly man's perspective. It's heartbreaking from the younger man's perspective. It's heartbreaking from everybody's perspective. And it makes me think like maybe the real problem is not one individual's choice, but is it us as a society where we don't provide the kind of support a family needs to be able to do that and to be able to provide that for their elderly? Maybe that's where that has to begin. Just like we don't provide enough support to mothers and children, maybe we don't provide enough support to families in order to be able to take care of the elderly. And maybe it is a societal issue more than an individual one.
I was going to tell you, coming from the great United States of America, I can tell you it is definitely societal here.
Yeah. I mean, it would be so much easier to just assume that the guy's an asshole, but in real life, it's so much more complicated than that, isn't it?
Right. And even with that, you have, like you brought up, the idea of systemic and economic factors that are thrown into this. It is, like I said, it's that aspect of we're throwing people away because they don't have a use. And even the way in which we talk about families, I know, like in some states here, they're pushing for, well, we're not going to talk about families and different families and things like this. And some of the books that were being banned or pulled from library shelves and things like that were about non-traditional families, single mothers, grandparents raising their kids because, maybe their parents died or their parents can't, take care of them, and showing that there is a value to people and whatever demographic they happen to fall into or age group that they fall into, that they are not disposable. And because we don't necessarily put that value as far as like showing these images, showing, the real life and real world applications of people being included, that we just cast them aside. Or we take the opportunity to cast them aside.
Yeah, like marginalization and neglect are kind of built into how we do everything, right? But it even goes into like, at least here in America, because we're not allowed to learn about other places. Okay, it's not quite that bad, but it feels that way sometimes. But like everything is so built on, if you can't work, then you don't deserve anything. And so whether you have a disability, whether you're elderly, whether whatever the reason is, as soon as you can't be a cog in the machine making some rich person money, you have no fucking worth. And then we start looking at it that way, like our families, like, oh well, you can't get around as well, or we have to do too much for you, right? Like maybe we should be taking care of the people who took care of us, or that kind of thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are examples where our parents definitely did not take care of us. And I fully understand that's a different conversation. And overall, as a society, I feel like, why are we not taking care of these people other than it's a burden on us? And holy shit, what a selfish piece of shit reason that is.
And in part because we're so obsessed with never aging. Like, it's an individualist thing
Oh,
too. We
yeah.
are obsessed with anti-aging, with cosmetics, with all of that stuff, to the point where once somebody, has failed this ideal of anti-aging, once they have actually aged, that's it. We want to remove them from our presence as much as possible. Because lest we be reminded of the fact that we are, in fact, all of us aging. I love how we thought we wouldn't have a lot to say about all these others.
Right? So that brings us to segment 3. It's a Good Life, directed by Joe Dante, who did Gremlins and stuff. So that's exciting. I just kept talking about this one leading up to our chat, and I was talking about how it's an authoritarian who has the mindset of a child, destroying the lives of everybody that he interacts with. And I don't know if there's anything in politics, but this feels relevant to me.
It absolutely does feel relevant. And it's funny because I didn't even think about that while I was watching it, because I was just so terrified and on the edge of my seat most of the time. Like, this one genuinely scared the crap out of me at times. Probably also because I feel like they're going to hit you harder if you have specific fears. And like, kids are not something I'm super good or comfortable around to begin with. So that already was like my soft spot. And then it's just so much of the way this episode is put together, and finding something that I genuinely did not know from the beginning where it was going to go, genuinely had twists that I wasn't expecting, and genuinely had me anxious for these characters. That was fantastic. And I didn't realize that this was one of the original episodes. You were saying that it was kind of different than the original?
Yeah. In the end, okay, so Helen isn't even in it. Like the school teacher,
Yeah.
she's not even a character in the original. So I mean, when we say it's different, it's definitely different. But the ending is also like everybody's still under his control and still stuck in this world. Whereas in this one, I mean, it's a little ambiguous still, but at least Helen's trying to change him and trying to get him to use his powers for something else, right?
Yeah, there's some hope. Well, I do love the addition of Helen, because it's like so cool to have this complete outsider's perspective and seeing these people, seeing their expressions as they were trying so hard to keep it together, and seeing what was underneath those smiles. That was absolutely mesmerizing to me. I love that.
Yeah, I like this version better. We get like when they're going through her purse, like that's such good anxiety and such good tension, and also just desperation on their part. And then the scariest thing in it to me is the girl with no mouth. And these people would be used to her, so we wouldn't not that Helen ever sees her per se, but she sees her from the back. But as serving as like the audience identifier in this, so we're following her and we're learning about this world as she does. When we see that girl, holy shit. And I feel like if it was any of the others, they wouldn't even bother looking in her room. So I think that she's such an excellent addition and just adds to the what the hell is happening and oh my god factor.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to mess up both of you.
Sweet.
I guess I'm going to admit me being a messed up child. Because when I saw this movie as a kid, obviously you have different eyes, different experience, lived experience that changes your perspective on things. But when I saw this movie as a kid, I was thinking like, that'd be awesome.
Oh my goodness, no.
You say this up as a kid in the 80s, you're constantly told to shut up. You're constantly told like what you can't do and all these other things as far as like you're not important. I mean, it's the joke with Gen X is like that we were raised off of hose water and neglect. And there were conversations you couldn't have, whereas you're seeing this kid as a kid, you're seeing what happens when you have that power as a kid to do things. So your mind immediately goes to, what would I do? What would I have to eat every day if I had a choice? And you start seeing what happens when something is unrestrained. So as an adult, you now see the downside of that, which is what the fuck? Because as a kid, I started thinking like, oh, these people must have really pissed him off. They must have done something to him, because you're not going to harm somebody as a kid or do something bad to them as a kid unless they've done something bad to you. But as an adult, I see it with different eyes, which is they're so fearful of what he can do from the first moment of him doing something that they're afraid to say anything. They're afraid to stop him from using his magic, his abilities, right? Because of what could happen to them, as opposed to here's what you should do because this is the right thing to do. But then again, you get into what's right and what's wrong. So I completely saw the family as a different element as a kid as I did as an adult. But there's part of me still as an adult that's thinking like, if I had these abilities, what would I do? I mean, there'd definitely be a lot of people with no mouths.
I never thought of that perspective, I guess, because I didn't see this when I was a kid. The only time I saw it was now. So I was identifying with the school teacher the whole time. Like I was a little bird on her shoulder, totally going through it with her from the moment that this kid asked to be taken home. And I was like already in terror thinking, wow, you're about to put a strange child in your car. And I get that it's the time, like you don't have a cell phone, you don't have a lot of other options if a kid needs to be taken home. But today, in no universe would I just be randomly putting a strange child in my car and taking him to an address that he tells me. Like there are a whole series of things I would do first. I would ask him for his phone number, call his parents and ask if it's okay if I put him in my car. If that's not available, I would call the police and ask them if it's okay if I put him in my car. Like a million other things.
Or
and
if
like,
they can come get him.
Or that. Just from that moment, I was already in terror for her the whole time. So when she walks into this house, all I saw was these people who were overly friendly, like aggressively friendly to the point of being controlling, which, yes, in hindsight is desperation, clearly. But at the start, all I saw was these like incredibly aggressively friendly people. And I was instantly, the moment she got in that house, I would have gone out again. I was terrified and pushing myself back in my seat and going, no, please leave, please leave, please leave. Although obviously I knew she wasn't gonna, because that would have been a very short movie. And I kept thinking, I wish, my guess was that they were somehow going to do the bad thing, right? That the family who were so overly friendly were the ones who were going to be doing the terrible thing. And I thought, wow, I wish I could show this to all of my colleagues in publishing, because some of them cannot recognize when somebody is being aggressively and overly ridiculously friendly to the point of having teeth from ear to ear. And this is a very good example of why that gives you a sort of feeling. Right? You have a feeling that there's something else going on. There's no way you don't. Even if you're wrong about what it is, you have a feeling. I just really loved that about this episode. I was just in terror for that poor girl the whole time.
Look, overly happy, overly joyous people make me very suspicious. Like it puts me on edge. James has been around me where I'm like, and I'll say to him like, that motherfucker's too happy. I'm like,
it's not exactly an easy bar. It's not like everybody who's happy or anything like that. Because whenever I say this stuff, everybody goes, "Oh, but I'm happy. I'm friendly. I compliment people all the time."
Not like that.
Whenever you're the person saying that on the defensive, no, you're not. You're not that specific kind of people we're talking about. It is a specific kind. And if you're thinking, "Oh gosh, might this be how I come off?" It's already not you. Because at no point are those people thinking about how they come off. At no point would they hear this and think it's about them. Absolutely. It's not you. Don't worry about it.
No, it's like James and I had these discussions. Of course, you're going to be privy to it as well as everybody else who's listening. Like I've been sucked into conversations, within my past, sucked into conversations because somebody was really nice. And I'm like, I don't want to be an asshole. I don't want to be rude. I don't want to. And then it descends into they might say something inappropriate, or they'll invite me to church or something, and it's always like something I'm like, I don't want anything. I don't want to be in this situation. Yeah. So when you talk about being the little birdie on her shoulder, as an adult, I see that same thing, which is I've seen this movie. I can't even count how many times I've seen it, but with the eyes of an adult, with the eyes of a parent, with the eyes of an educator, I look at her role as being indicative of, I'm going to be concerned about her. I'm scared about her. I don't give a damn about the little boy. I don't give a damn about the family. I give a damn about her because I know what happens when you have that parental mindset. You have that mentor mindset, which is, I need to fix this.
Yeah.
I need to fix this. I need to help, as opposed to, I need to leave.
You will get into so much trouble by being the person who tries to help, by getting involved in things that you don't want to do. And this isn't that you shouldn't do. And this isn't a PSA not to do them, because largely the people who are like that are not going to be able to stop being like that. So it's not a PSA. It's just a statement of fact. You get into so much trouble when you try to help and you get involved in other people's intimate problems. Oh boy. Fun times are had by everybody.
Hilarity ensues. When you were talking about like putting a random kid in your car just now, all I could think, like on the one hand, I'm like, it'd be funny if he started yelling help as you start driving, you know, but
that would not be funny. That would be terrifying. Oh my God, even just saying these things terrifies me. Even just saying the words, putting a random kid in your car. Oh, my goodness.
But my first thought would be, because I'm a totally paranoid individual, I'd be like, no, this is a trap. I put the kid in my car, I go out to their house, and then they capture me, and I'm fucked. And so I would be a dick and not help this child.
I'd help that kid by calling the police. You know.
Look, I'm helping the kid by, here's $20 for your bike, and I'm going to call somebody to come get you. Like that's where it is now. But you know, as far as like, this is a movie that came out in '83. It's still on that late 1970s mindset, which is, it's not necessarily stranger danger yet. Stranger danger is more like the '80s in the US. But it was in that mindset of like, you have gender dynamics that are thrown into it. So a lot of the stranger, you know, PSAs that were out, it was always about men abducting kids, or men, you know, it was always, I should say always. It was all you typically had like homosexuality being tied to or linked with pedophilia, which is false. But that was the way it was pushed, which, you know, don't get in a strange man's car. Watch out for that van. But here you have a moment where it's a, you know, an objectively attractive woman, right? Young woman, as the way she's presented, innocent. So the idea that the kid going with her is not an issue. That's where our fear typically goes as a child, like, oh, this is a stranger, he shouldn't get in the car with her. But we know what we're being set up for, because it's the Twilight Zone. She's not the bad person.
She's not the danger.
It's got to be something else. It's got to be something else. So you have to have that flip side of it, which you bring up, which is, it's a stranger, whether it's a kid or an adult. Like, do I really want to get invested in this? But because so much of the mindset was like, hey, you know, help your neighbor that you trust, or help a kid, or do these types of things. It's not seen as an oddity because, hey, everybody saw this woman take the kid, you know, offer the kid a ride, or at least take the kid in the car and go off. So it's understood in general sense that this is a safe moment of this story, because nothing bad's going to happen with him going with her or her taking him in the car.
Also, we say that now we would handle things differently, and that's totally true. But also, you got to keep in mind that she seems to be 24, I'm guessing, 25. I mean, I've done stupider shit when I was 24. That shouldn't even count. You're barely a fully fledged adult when you're 24. So,
well, and they add this extra piece that makes it so much fun, where she's a school teacher.
Yeah.
So, like, your thought would be taking care of children. And I love that it's never like thrown at us or anything like that, but it's such a nice little added thing. I don't know.
Kids are her comfort zone already. Yeah. So of course she doesn't even think twice about it.
Yeah, I'm telling you right now.
She's not like Dawn going, scary white girl, and running away. You know, so.
Well, if they were to redo this, because I've since I first saw this movie as a kid, I've always wanted like a second and a third and a fourth movie. Like this should have gone like Creepshow and Tales from the Hood and all these other anthology, or even like Mortuary Collection should do. it should be a series of movies that come out, because I would love for, I mean, since it hasn't happened, I would love for a new adaptation. You take this story, you change it for the movie from the TV show. Now you change it again, and we have a different dynamic of, yeah, she is the bad person.
Mm-hmm.
This kid is not necessarily feared, but this kid is understood that he's making everything good in this area. And here comes this random stranger, because we're going to stick with, she's young, she's objectively attractive, she's pleasant, all these things. And that becomes the mask, because this little boy, he never changes other than like one instance, he never really changes his demeanor with her. Mm-hmm. It's always pleasant. It's always nice. What can I do for you? Oh, you didn't like the dinner? I could have something else made. Oh, you're bored? Uncle Walt's going to do a magic trick. It's all about demonstrating that he's safe and he shouldn't be feared, whereas everyone else fears him because they don't know how to communicate with him. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is they don't know how to communicate with him, don't know how to set limits or boundaries. And as a result, you end up having what James described very, very well, which is you have somebody with the mind of a child with unlimited powers and no accountability. There's no moment where, he's challenged, and it seems like the one time he was challenged, it was a way that he didn't like it, as opposed to, hey, Timmy, I'm just going to use the generic Timmy, let's sit down and talk about your feelings. You shouldn't have put that thing on your sister's mouth. You shouldn't have removed her mouth. You didn't like what she said. You didn't like what she did, but here's a better way to go about this. And maybe somebody would, if you did something like this movie, somebody would complain about it being too woke. But yeah, talking to kids is a lot more beneficial than ignoring and enabling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only reason why the story works at all as a plot is because it's a child. Because if you'd had an adult, like if this was a 25-year-old young man who was doing this, who had these powers and had that mindset that he should get whatever he wants, there would be no changing him. Well, yes, but there would be no changing him. It would just literally be throwing Helen into a cannon and shooting her at a pack of lions. Right. There would be absolutely no dynamic whatsoever. There would be no negotiating. There would be no changing that. Right. And the only reason why this works is it's a child, and there's still this like flexibility of mind that makes you think there is a possibility that he is going to learn something and change something. Like there's a chance. It might not happen, but the chance exists for sure.
Right.
Or maybe I'm just too hard on 25-year-old men. I don't know. But I have my doubts.
You're not. Having been around a significant number of them, and having been one, I can tell you, like the 25-year-old mentality, you can say we're adults at that point, but we're not. We're still stupid. And I'll say the same thing still at 30 and 35. Your maturity is all going to be based off of, your experiences and based off an individual basis. And I had no qualms in telling somebody that I didn't become an adult until I was around 40, 42.
Oh, yeah.
As far as like understanding the consequences and how circumstances can change. And even, my mindset on various political things. I'm like, no, that doesn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. Like, why?
No, I have no problem admitting the same, that I wasn't a whole person at 25. I absolutely was not. And there's no shame in that.
No, and that's what people need to understand is you're going to make mistakes. It's so much better to make mistakes when you're younger than to learn from them. But to make those mistakes and learn from them when you're younger, then get to, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, and you've been making all these mistakes and you've never done anything to correct them. And, I'm sure little Timmy would be one of those guys if you hadn't had this interaction that we're assuming became positive. Yeah. That he'd be one of those 60, 70-year-old guys who's wondering, like, why don't my kids and grandkids call me?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're an asshole, Pop.
Well, yeah, that's a fun thing to picture too, because if Timmy grows up still having these powers, still doing these things, nothing stays exactly the same for long. There's no way he would be doing the exact same things. There's no way he wouldn't be learning from experiences along the way. It's when that same Timmy doesn't experience anything and doesn't experience any growth during his entire formative years and young adulthood, and he ends up, being 45, 50, and suddenly gets these powers with no foundation, that you have true horror. And now I'm talking about your politics.
Yeah, I mean, it's
To be fair, I don't know anything about him, but I'm assuming he had a pretty sheltered life. Sure.
Yeah, you're surrounded by yes men your entire life. No one will challenge you, and everyone fears the consequences of pissing you off.
I'm not even sure I know this, but was Trump born wealthy, or was he born? Okay.
Silver spoon in both ends.
Oh, okay.
He was actually given a shitload of money and lost it all right away. So,
and yet somehow he gets all the poor people to vote for him too. That is weird. That is confusing.
He encapsulated this very well in 2016, and I pointed it out to people I knew who supported him at the time. He said after one of the primaries, "Oh, we did so great with the uneducated. I love the uneducated." And I'm like, he is laughing in your fucking faces about this.
I love that he just says it. He just says the things. It's people who aren't listening because he just says them. He fully tells you exactly who he is and what he's doing.
They listen. They just make excuses and go, "That's not what it means."
Well, if you look at the kid, to bring it back to him, if you look at him, I also question most guys are not good with rejection. You already have him in a situation where he's being told yes, 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 yes as a child. Now imagine he goes into adolescence and becomes a teenager, and the first girl or first partner that he pursues, it's no. Imagine what somebody like this would do with the power that he doesn't like being told no, and someone outside of this realm, outside of this family, that he's interested in, wants to be with, because he says, like, you're just going to leave me like everybody else. Imagine the way that this person would gaslight, torture, manipulate a romantic partner that they're, and I'm using partner very loosely, a romantic partner that they desire, potential partner that they desire, and that potential is cut off by this simple 2-letter word, no.
Which is also a whole sentence. I guess it depends so much on the structure of the person. There's this fundamental thing that I believe, I don't know whether it's something we're taught or something we have, but I believe some people can learn from the cues of the people around them. And even though in this movie, he's not experiencing rejection, right? Everybody's telling him yes, yes, yes. Some people are going to see that, but they are going to also see the terror in people's eyes. They're going to see the fear and the oppression that they're causing, and they are going to interpret that as its own form of rejection and learn that when I do this, it does hurt people and it does do bad things. And that is its own form of telling me to stop. And therefore, I'm going to change what I do. And lots of people have the capacity to make that adjustment automatically, instinctually, and lots of other people learn to do it. Just seeing the person that you're confronted with having an unpleasant time and going, oh, that is as good as saying no to me because that means no. And I do think that it depends largely on who he is, which we're not going to know from this one short little episode. But yeah, he might end up being that guy who can't even take a woman rejecting him. Or he might end up being somebody who has spent the next, how old is he in this? He's probably like 9-ish, 10, I'm guessing. Right. I don't even know.
I was thinking 7, 8, something like that.
But let's say he spends the next 10 or 12 years of his life learning from those cues. Because I do feel like I get some hints of recognition from him. Like he can kind of tell when he's pushing people too far. There's some sort of little seed of empathy in there. And I think that changes the whole way that a person is going to turn out.
Yeah, and he's not at the age where he'd be paying attention to those cues that you were talking about,
Yeah, it would only ever have to be like some sort of small reflex at that age. There's no way he would be very good at it. So just having that small reflex kind of gives me hope that he might learn.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he has Helen. Like we end with him and Helen. So she can be there to teach him.
Unless he holds her mouth shut.
Well, yeah, and it could, but you know, if he wants to be taught by her, which he seems to have put her on a different level. Like, we don't know where his real family is. You know, like his real parents. We
Mhm.
have placements that he's brought in to be in those roles and do the things they're supposed to do, and but like that's a big threat in itself to make sure you follow him, whatever happened to those parents, right? But then, like, if he truly got to a point where he is craving, you know, Helen being a teacher of sorts, like she could very easily be the one to teach him this stuff. So I don't necessarily think he's hopeless, but I'm also very jaded and have no hope in humanity. So I expect it to get worse as he gets older.
I'm pretty sure those parents got what they deserved. I'm pretty sure those parents are part of the reason why he is the way he is. I'm pretty sure that this is a very traumatized kid, because I'm getting that sort of like, you know, a kid who has a superpower of getting people to do whatever he wants. That is basically a metaphor for being somebody who grew up with serious trauma and being highly manipulative as a direct effect of that trauma. So I'm pretty sure that original family is not somebody we should be pitying. That's just my guess, though. I'm not sure.
I'm going to go even further, Alex. I think that he has stunted himself to remain a child.
No,
Because
that's terrible. That's terrible.
Because I was looking at something, it was talking about your psychological aging or your development, something like that, where when you have a traumatic experience at a certain age, and I can't remember what it's called, but you have a traumatic experience at a certain age, and then that kind of becomes that starting off point for where you are. Like as far as like
your emotional age kind of remains not stuck forever, but it kind of pulls back towards that. Yeah, I've heard of that too.
And he's looking for comfort. You know, he's got the comfort foods because I speak for myself. I know I made bullshit food when I was a kid, and the Ninja Turtles did not help
now
because like, I wonder what this pizza is going to be like with chocolate syrup. Oh, not too bad, not great, but not too. But it's one of those, like, even my kid and I were watching Bluey the other day, and they have this one episode where it's romance or something. They're pretending to take the parents out make a romantic dinner for them. So one of the kids just takes all this shit out of the cupboards and puts it together. It's like baked beans and Jello and fruit and like ham. It puts it all on one plate. Like, oh, this is a special, you know, chef selection. You think about yeah, exactly. You think about how you would have been affected or impacted at the age of those comfort foods that you found, or these ridiculous things that you would make. Like my kid does it, where she's like, "Oh, I made my own," you know. And really, all it was is she took like 3 or 4 juices and mixed them together. Same thing, you know, when you went to the fountain drinks and you were allowed to pour it yourself. As a kid, you're like, "I wonder what all these flavors taste like together." And every now and then as an adult, you're like, oh, I remember this one time I made X. And that you try it out as an adult is not the same because everything for you has changed. Your palate has changed. But I think by him stunting himself, at least in my head, him stunting himself, he always gets to hold on to, oh, here's this curious behavior I had. Here's this adventurous thing. Here's this way of, I'm protecting these people. I'm keeping them safe because somebody else couldn't keep me safe. But my idea of keeping them safe is not what they view as being safe. This is imprisonment for them. And he keeps pushing that whole thing of like, everything's great here. Everything's fine. You're safe. This is So for me, it's somebody who has been psychologically or physically damaged, or possibly in other ways damaged. And this is their way of trying to hold on to that safety and security, even though it's coming at the price of somebody else's safety, security, and independence.
Wow, your interpretation is just throwing so much of a darker light on this, right? Because like, if we're going with the whole thing of it being a metaphor, then what you're saying is this is essentially a metaphor for an adult man who is incredibly abusive and manipulative of his family, of the people around him, of his potential partner, represented by the school teacher, and who ended up that way largely because he was abused himself as a child. Like, this is so dark at this point.
I'm telling you, this is also my segue to tell folks, go to therapy.
I would like to see, if they remake this, I would like to see it where the twist is that it's the same kid and he's been doing this for 60 years. And so like the family has died and he has to keep bringing new people in. And if that's what happened to the original family, that would be amazing.
I think that's why everybody in town doesn't like him, because they're like, oh shit, we're gonna get taken if we fuck with that kid.
And so, like, you know, then you'd have a third version of this, much like 20,000 Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, where there's 3 versions. And you know, I just really wanted to move on to the next segment, so I thought I'd be a dick and do that.
Wait, are you including the new Twilight Zone version?
Yeah, so it'd be 30,000 feet on that one, because you know that's the big twist. It's higher in the air this time. No. I did not get to rewatch that one, unfortunately, so I don't have much to say on the newest version of this. But this one is probably the most well-known episode of the Twilight Zone, I would think, or at least, you know, one of the top 3.
It's one of the most parodied.
What's that?
I said it's one of the most parodied.
Absolutely.
Whether we're talking about the William Shatner or John Lithgow one.
Well, actually, my favorite reference to it in all of pop culture was in Third Rock from the Sun, when Shatner gets off the plane and he's telling John Lithgow, oh, there was this gremlin on the wing, and Lithgow goes, the same thing happened to me. And that is like my favorite joke in all of Third Rock from the Sun. So, and then of course the Simpsons did it, because Simpsons did it. And, you know, that one's utterly fantastic as well. Simpsons did most of these, actually. I think Kick the Can's the only one they didn't do out of this set.
They had a reference to it in one of their episodes. Not necessarily Treehouse ones, but they had a reference to it with, I think it was the drugs that were being given to the people at the retirement home.
Good times. Anyway, yeah, so this one... Alex, have you seen any of the other versions of the Nightmare at 20,000 Feet or not?
At least not that I actively remember. I've seen them for sure when I was a kid, but no, there's nothing that sticks out in my memory other than the really beautiful scene at the start of Castaway where the plane goes down, which I've always thought was one of my favorite plane going down scenes ever. But no, I haven't seen any of the other versions of this.
So I don't remember the newest version on the latest reboot of the Twilight Zone, but on the original with Shatner versus this one, the only real difference to me is there's just like way more focus on like the paranoia and the claustrophobia inside the plane. The first one feels more, I don't want to say laid back, but it just didn't have that same anxiety feeling to me.
Yeah.
There's probably some other differences, but that's the main thing I remember being different.
You think about it, it's incredible how much we actually suppress when we're on a plane, which in any other situation we would absolutely not be able to. Like if you just think about it, I came back from StokerCon, right? And I was in the cheap seats, right? As you do. And that meant that I had landed a middle seat and I had a person to the right of me and a person to the left. And they are complete strangers, right? And you're close enough to touch these strangers. No, it's not that you're close enough to touch. You are actively touching these strangers, often, if not constantly. And I was just sitting there thinking, is it weird that we never turn around to actually look each other in the face? Like, aside from my issue with not recognizing faces in general, but I wouldn't be able to pick those people out, even the moment I stepped off the plane, because we never physically really turn fully and look at each other properly. We sort of glance and while we talk and gesture and say hi, and then everybody puts in their earphones and watches a movie and you sleep and you try not to make a lot of contact with strangers because... what if you're going to not like them and then you're stuck touching them for the next 11 to 12 hours?
Right.
And I was just thinking, what other context do you get to have a person touching you physically on the left, one on the right? You don't know them and you're not looking at each other. Do that on the street. And it is basically a horror movie that you're describing at that point.
Right?
Like some weird shit is happening. That is
I've
not
even I've had whole conversations with people on the plane, and by the time we go get baggage, I'm like, I think that's the guy I was talking to.
Yeah,
You know,
more
like,
for the vibes or the clothing. You don't fully look them in the face. Or maybe I'm just giving myself away as a massive weirdo right now
no,
because
but even
No, you're not a weirdo.
But even like you know, it's immediately like you go through so many people, even just getting off the plane, there's the mad rush,
Yeah.
then going
Yeah.
through the airport to get to baggage claim, that
Yeah.
by the time you see them again, like even the people I've had full fucking conversations with, I'm like, I don't know, he was wearing a black shirt and had white
Yeah.
hair. Like that looks like him. Maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know.
As characters, they're kind of disposable in that moment. They're almost like the non-playing characters in video games. Like they're there as a setting. You're not expecting to necessarily form a relationship with anybody on a flight.
Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, I thought that was
It's
incredibly weird. And
But
then when you add to it the claustrophobia of, if you really think about it, how small that space is and how
Mhm.
little air fits inside of it.
If you're on a plane listening to this right now, you're probably gonna
We're
die.
so
Sorry to tell
sorry.
you. Uh,
Are either of you afraid of flying?
I'm
love
afraid
flying.
of crashing.
Okay, nobody's looking forward to that part, Don. Nobody's like, I hope.
There's probably one guy, but you know.
Okay,
I
that's
I
true. I
have
shouldn't say that.
anxieties with flying. My wife did not help on the last flight because we were leaving out of Venice, and we had like a little bit of turbulence on the flight into Europe. But on the flight out, you know, looking, I see there's like some rain clouds, some storm clouds. I'm like, fuck. You know, to myself, I'm like, oh, this is gonna suck. This is gonna suck. And as we're taking off, as we're taxiing, right, she turns to me and says, "Oh, I think we're probably going to end up flying straight into that storm." I was like, why the fuck did you just say that?
I would have been that person. I would have totally said that. I wouldn't even have thought twice about it because I would have found it fascinating. I'm like, oh, look at those massive black clouds we're going straight into. That's going to be so cool. A flash of lightning. Awesome.
Hey guys,
I'm
look out my window. You got to see this lightning.
distance.
Yeah, that's me totally. It's funny because I know this isn't going to apply to everybody. A lot of people have very serious flying anxiety, like on a chemical level, and it doesn't matter what you tell yourself or what you do or what the rest of your life is like around it. But for me, there was a point when I was like at the worst part of my life, when I was still living in a bad situation I hadn't gotten out of yet, when everything was still very shaky for me. And at that time, it wasn't just flying. I had no fear of death whatsoever. I had no fear of anything whatsoever. I would hitchhike across the country. When the plane started bouncing, I would be that crazy person that go, whoa, well, roller coaster, fun. And there were times when people, because I've flown so much with work for 10 years of my life, I was flying more than I was on the ground. So there were bad times. There were times when people next to me whipped out rosaries and I was like, this is fun. And now that my life is in so much a better place, I actually have started to feel a little bit of the normal levels of fear that you're supposed to, like doubt. I still don't have flying anxiety or anything like that. I'm still totally fine. But I feel that thing now that other people feel. I'm like, I sure hope it doesn't go down. I hope the pilot wants to live today.
I was waiting for you to say the lady pulled out a rosary and you were like, that will not save you on this flight. I was waiting for you to do something like that.
No, I was not a badass. No. There was this amazing time when the turbulence was so bad on this little like tiny flight. The smaller ones where it's basically one row of chairs on either side and that's it.
God.
I love
jumpers.
those with the propellers on the outside. I fucking love those things. And we were going towards Malta, and they have like phenomenal sandstorms occasionally, which are well known for being terrifying to be in. And we were bouncing around so bad in this sandstorm And the cockpit was one of those open ones. Like, it's just, there's no door. You just see the pilots and you see out the front window, right?
Oh my God.
And at one point there was this big bounce and something from the cockpit just thumped to the ground and then quickly slid backwards between the chairs towards the back of the plane and stopped somewhere vaguely in my area. And I shit you not, it was the instruction manual for flying the plane. It's like this thick brick of a tome of like technical instructions of some sort or another. It was hilarious. And there was a little stewardess came out, was like on her heels, tippy, 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 picking up the manual, taking it back to the cockpit. Of course, I was thinking, I sure hope they don't need to consult that.
Well,
I used to love that stuff.
You're going to take that as the opportunity to fly the plane. I mean,
no, I'm not a brave person, and I certainly was not at that point. No,
you were in training. That's why they sent it to you. So you were the backup in case the pilot went down. So
I was fine with whatever he decided to do that day. I was good, thank you.
My most terrifying flight ever. I was in the exit row, and I was the only one in the full exit row, like all 6 seats. I was the only one, right?
Is that even allowed?
I don't know. It happened anyway.
Wow.
So I'm like kicked back, like literally, like, you know, just like stretched across the 3 seats because it's a night flight, and I'm looking out the opposing window, and then I see flames, and one of our engines had caught fire. And I see the flight attendant come up and like look out the window, and then she starts taking pictures, and then she went back up front. And then she came back again and she was taking pictures on her phone, and then she went back up front and she looked at me and just like gave me this weird look and then left. And I was like, are those flames? You know, and no one else on the flight seems to notice this. So I'm extra freaked out, which reminded me of this episode that I'm the only one seeing what's happening outside the window. And we were descending at the time. So we were almost there. And probably 5-10 minutes later, we were on the ground. And then like fire crews were already there waiting for us, and they never fucking said anything about it. And I was on a connecting flight. So now I'm in Denver, and I'm just like sitting there like, am I getting on my next plane? Am I not? Like, and my wife was like, look, I don't think it's going to be worse. Like, I think if you survived that flight, you'll survive whatever at this point, you know? And she eventually talked me into getting on my next flight and coming home. And now I keep flying, and it's become sort of funny to me. But in the moment, I was freaking the fuck out. And it's really funny because the dumbest thing I remember about this is that it was when we were recording the episode for the new Suspiria movie, and Don and Gemma Moore were going to record this. And I was like, hey guys, I don't think I'm going to make it home in time to do this. I know it's tomorrow, but I'm a little freaked out because my plane was on fire. And I didn't do the episode. And I don't know why that's what I remember from this fucking trip. But I remember sitting in Denver going, nope, I can't do the episode tomorrow, guys.
That's brilliant. And that is how it is, isn't it? Always. They never tell you anything. You're not going to know. You could have been on flights where pieces fell off. You wouldn't know unless you find out some other way. They're not going to bloody tell you exactly what happened. It is kind of scary.
But yeah, so I always thought that was crazy. But even in the moment, it reminded me of this gremlin on the wing thing.
Oh, goodness. Well, actually, I did have a question for the both of you that's not plane related, but it is related to this show. Have you ever been so incredibly convinced that you were seeing something dangerous and nobody else was listening to you? Has that ever happened in any way, shape, or form? And I'm not talking about the president.
The former president. Got it.
Yes, the former president.
Hall of Famer.
No, I couldn't resist. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure tons of times. I literally, one of my definitions of horror that I love the most is when one person sees that something's not normal and everyone else around them thinks everything's fine. And those stories always rip me up. So although I can't pull any examples this second, there must be something there that those stories always terrify me and always pull me in.
Yeah. I have a standard.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was guessing James probably remembers this, but I have a standard thing that I tell to anybody that I'm near, like anybody I'm close to. And that is, if I say we need to fucking go, don't ask any questions. Let's get the fuck out of this situation. And I've said that to him where I'm like, if some shit, like I said, something seems weird, but if I say just let's follow me or just come with me, don't ask any questions. So I do the same thing with my kid where I'm like, if something, don't fucking ask me. And I will tell her, like, because I'm like, you know, when daddy has a certain tone and he uses certain language, if I say it a certain way, you don't ask me any questions. You come with me, or we go somewhere, we do wherever we are, just stay with me. And she's like, but I said, no buts. So, you know, I tell the same thing to Claudia because you have that intuition about things that are going to, because I've seen some bad shit go down, but you have that intuition that's because of the trauma and because of life experience that gets drilled into you where you're like, I'm going to recognize some shit that's not right. Not all the time, but I'm going to notice that something's off. Sure. And I'm going to get the fuck out of that situation.
Wrong.
Yeah.
If you're totally wrong, all you're doing is that you're leaving a situation a bit early and absolutely nothing happens. Worst case scenario, you were right and something horrible happens. So yeah, of course.
And I would like to point out that the one time that Don has done this to me, I remember it very clearly. He looked at me, he's like, we need to go now. And you know what I did? I went,
you got up and went.
Why? What's happening?
No!
After all these times that he specifically told me not to do it, that was my immediate response.
I think it's a personality trait. You're either one kind of person or another. I wouldn't even think for a second. I would be on my feet before he finished the sentence. There is no way I would.
I told James when he said, what's going on? I said, I can't fucking tell you. Get the fuck up. Let's get the fuck out of here now.
And then he got
happened. Yeah. He saw. He realized what it was. It was an abusive former partner of mine. What happened to be in the room? I only saw like a glimpse of her, and I'm like, we need to get the fuck out of here, because one, I didn't want her to see me, and then two, I didn't want to interact with her at all.
Yeah,
because she. I mean, you know, if you do Google search, you'll find out who she was. But I'm not going to name the devil on this episode. Because the devil doesn't need to be compared to this individual. So, you know, we were in that moment. I'm like, I don't want to be around this person because everyone I knew at the time was like, oh, you know, they were basically recognizing the stuff I should have recognized. But I turned, you know, that radar, that, you know, whatever that is, I turned it off and kind of ignored it for so long that I wasn't seeing what was taking place in my own home. So after that moment, I'm like, nope, let's get the fuck out of here. Let's get the fuck out of here. And I think, what year was the guy tried to shoot up Phoenix Fan Fusion, James?
I don't remember.
Yeah. It was, I think you and I were doing something, and not that I'm saying I detected that this was going to go on, but it was just like, I don't feel like going in right now. It's got a weird vibe. Let's go get something to eat. And then we got the news that some dude had tried to get into Phoenix and shoot it up with because, you know, some guy he was obsessed with wouldn't return his letters or emails. God, it was that long ago. Damn.
Wow.
But yeah, it's situation like that where you're like, nope, don't ask questions. But especially on a plane.
In real life, that's what it usually is, isn't it, for most of us? These situations like his where you know there's something wrong and nobody else will believe you. It's always a person. It's almost always a person. It's almost always somebody. And I have tried to explain that to the people around me too, that there is a reason why if I'm telling you there's a problem, we can verify it later. Just in the moment, you need to believe me there's a problem. Because my life has been a masterclass, an extended 34-year masterclass of learning how to minutely identify these specific kinds of people. I need you to trust me that I know what I'm talking about, even if in that moment, there's no way I can give you the crash course of why. It's going to sound insane in the same way that if I tried to explain a masterclass of astrophysics to you in 3 seconds, it would sound insane. You just need to trust me. But that's what it usually is, isn't it? It's a person that you know and you're certain and you see it. And if only people would listen to you for a minute and actually pay attention, they would eventually see it too. Which is why I love the ending. I love that when they get down, it's not just he gets carted off in the ambulance and it's over. No, there is vindication to some extent. There is something, and people see it. And I'm like, yes, motherfuckers, see, that's how it goes.
And that's one thing they do amazingly well in this is the no one will believe me thing, right? Like everybody's immediately made up their mind. You're being crazy. And then even when he's vindicated, it's not like they're walking over going, shit, you were right, man. I'm so sorry.
No, they're
you
not.
know, like
at least we know.
Yeah.
You know, that's something. At least we know.
Well, more importantly, at least he knows, because it's like, I'm not crazy. You know, that's one of the more satisfying things. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a good ending, but that's one of the satisfying things is when you are proven right and you don't even want the accolades. It's the issue of like, I was right. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining any of this. I saw it with my own eyes. I touched it. I tasted, whatever it happens. Like I experienced this and it was real. All the rest of you weren't paying attention.
You wish
I don't
you
need an
weren't
apology.
Right.
Yeah, I don't need any vindication. I don't need any type of closure to where people are thanking or rewarding me. It's simply, I fucking knew it. I fucking knew it.
If anything, sometimes
it's like when I tell people about Trump. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. There is that feeling too of, I wish I could know it less. I wish I could be less right about these things. I wish it would happen less often. And I wish I wouldn't need to be right about things like that.
Yep.
But yeah, if that's not an option, then the next best thing is getting the vindication of going, yep, I wasn't crazy. And the system still works. And my body still knows what it's talking about.
Yeah.
Do either of you have anything else to add to this segment before we move to the final moments?
Nope. That flying is terrifying. It's just
terrifying.
Terrifying.
Look, the scariest thing for that whole plane segment, the terror at 20,000 feet segment, was the little girl. That was the scariest thing for me. Because kids on flights. And I'm not saying that, it's just one of those things of, she just plays a brat so well. Just a rude little kid that you never want. I have no problem with kids on flights. I have a problem with kids who just kind of like with Anthony's story. There's no boundaries that are set. Yeah, walk all over the plane, bother people that you don't know, take their pictures, do all this bullshit. And I'm sitting there like, that would be more aggravating than seeing the demon or goblin or gremlin on the side of the
gremlin.
on the wing.
I need this girl out of here.
Exactly. It's like, I know you like kids.
So
but I got nothing else.
How'd you guys feel about the wraparound on this movie? First, we have the at the beginning and you want to see something really scary. And then we get pulled back to it at the end. And I thought it was lovely. But what did you guys think?
Oh, I loved it.
I'm going to let Alex go.
I absolutely love these kinds of like framing devices in books too. I mean, I'm obsessed with that stuff. And I loved it, especially the beginning. I felt like it was really easing us into something. It was like a warm welcome. And at that point, it's a conversation, right, between them and the audience. They're like, you know what you're getting into. We know you know what you're getting into. We're just here to say hi and warm you up. And everybody knows they're going to have a good time. And that was particularly fun for me because that whole intro, I was going like, oh my gosh, is that a tape? And then, oh my gosh, is that Credence? I was just fascinated by this sort of, like, it got me into the mindset of, okay, hang on, this is a different time. This came out at a different time. This is talking to a different audience. And I needed that. That was really fun for me. And I love a framing device. It was super great. Loved it.
I always love stuff like this, even if it's literally like a crypt keeper who's like, hey, I'm going to tell you some stories or whatever. Like, I love anything that kind of pulls it together like that. I always think that's cool. So,
I mean, I love the Cabinet of Curiosities intros too.
Yes.
Those were fantastic.
Oh, those were so good.
I think this is my only complaint about the wraparound. My only complaint is that I think it would have been cooler to not have the monster reveal again in the end. I think it should have just been, hey, you want to listen to some music? and then they played something, and you see his face, and you're like, "Oh fuck," and then you kind of continue and just drive off into the thing, as opposed to kind of have that moment again.
Yeah, you know what? I think you're right.
I like
Conceptually, it's exactly the same. It's just, I think, a small director's decision that I think I'm with you on this one. That would have been fun.
I'm gonna go the other way.
Okay.
I like the over the top. Like, I love Creep Show.
You do love an obvious ending too. You love that.
I just mean as far as like that bookend. I wanted that. Just kind of that, because you're watching the movie. It's not like wrestling where if something happened 5-10 years ago, you kind of have to remind somebody of what took place. You kind of know, he's fucked. Just from seeing Dan Aykroyd's face and asking, "Hey, you want to listen to some music? Is there anything cool you're in?" And have it leave it as that. But then again, I think this would have worked as an over-the-top ending for, not Creep Show. It would have been even Creep Show. It would have been a cool over-the-top ending for Creep Show, as they did with both 1 and 2. It would have been a cool over-the-top ending for. There was another really kind of fun, cheesy horror anthology called American Nightmares. Like that, I think that it would have fit there. But I think with this one, my personal opinion is I think you should have just left it as, "Oh shit, what's about to happen?"
I think either would work.
You don't have to show the shark.
All right. I guess that probably brings us to movie recs then, huh? So
we must.
I'm not prepared.
Oh, good. I once again have done this, Don. Here, as we're almost at the end, I have once again forgotten to tell the guests that we do movie recommendations. Yes, I've kept my consistency throughout this show.
I knew this. I just didn't think.
That's fine. I'll go while you're thinking. That's fine.
Yes. Go ahead.
I always do a double feature. Obviously, I love anthologies. We've covered many on this show, and I always talk about how much I love them. And I think I talked about it in every single episode of the Treehouse of Horror Simpsons episodes we did. But my favorite anthology, as weird as this is to me to say, because I feel like it would be one from when I was a kid, right? But it's the Mortuary Collection. I fucking love the Mortuary Collection. And if I was going to tell anybody to watch an anthology right now, that's the one I would tell them to watch. And then special shout out to Creep Show, the TV show. Jamie Flanagan wrote an episode called 20 Minutes with Cassandra. And it is so directly made for me. I know why many people did not like the end of it or different things like that, but man, it blew me away. And it's one of my favorite I think it's my favorite Creep Show episode of the series, but it's definitely up there if it's not. But I highly encourage anybody out there to watch that. Everything about it is fantastic. All right. Alex, are you ready, or would you like to go to Don's 482 movies first?
Let's go to Don first.
All right.
Is it themed this episode? Are we doing anthologies?
Anything you want. It doesn't matter. Just
enough.
Whatever you think people should watch. It's fine.
Okay.
All right. Okay, Don, what are your 482 movies?
Oh, gosh, I only have like 10. But you took one of them.
I find that hard to believe.
You did. It was Mortuary Collection.
No, I meant the 10.
Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm sorry, 12. So Creep Shows 1 and 2, I mentioned them. Trilogy of Terror, which doesn't get enough attention. Speak No Evil, Platform, War of the Worlds, Get Out, Cabin in the Woods, It Follows, all the Simpsons Treehouse episodes, Cat's Eye, which is a great anthology, but you don't realize it's fucking anthology. It's so well done as far as the way they seam it together. The Amazing Stories television series, and last but not least, not just the episode on Twilight Zone, the movie, but the entire series of Cursed Films, because it gives you a good historical understanding of those films, gives you behind the scenes, and it gives you kind of that real world element of, there was horror made on the screen, but there was horror making these movies. And that's it.
That's a really good addition to this. Yeah.
Well, okay,
Right.
I'm going to give a recommendation that's totally out of left field and very different. But I was just thinking, okay, what if I do find an anthology that's not something expected and not something, because you guys are the experts. You would have already recommended every good horror anthology under the sun, right? And I thought, well, there's actually one that never got billed as being a horror anthology. And I think it totally is. It got billed as, I think, action comedy at the time. And I find that ridiculous, especially in terms of the plot. It is a funny one. It is totally different to what you'd expect, but it's such a horror plot. And I love finding the genre in things where you wouldn't expect it. So, dear listeners, if you haven't seen Four Rooms, that is one of my favorite anthologies ever. And two of it's 4 shorts, and there's a framing device, and 2 of the 4 directors are Rodriguez and Tarantino. And I can't off the top of my head remember the other 2, but all 4 are very good. And it is fully horror. I mean, I remember you have a coven of witches involved. You have the very last one, I think, is Tarantino's, and there's this beautiful, intense, bloody scene that to me speaks to my horror core so much. And yeah, they built it as a comedy action or something like that for some reason, which I found hilarious.
It's so crazy.
It's a very, very, very good, and I think people should watch it. More people should know about it.
Well, fantastic. All right, I suppose that brings us to where can people find you online, Alex, and Tenebrous and everything else?
I am not important, but they should totally find tenebrous.press.com, because that's our website and that's where we sell books. And we are at Tenebrous Press on Twitter or wherever else. We still have a presence on like Insta and Blue Sky and everywhere you want, although we're not that active in other places. We do have a newsletter on Substack. It is not going to be racist screeds, unlike some Substacks that were released today. That's you can find us as Tenebrous Press anywhere, and if you really need to find us as individuals, you'll find us from there.
Very nice. And would you say that you have a book out that people should check out?
I have a book out. It's called Whisperwood by Alex Woodrow, and it's like The Witcher but with Romanian folklore and a woman protagonist and more exploring and less killing things, I think. But it's really fun.
Nice. Well, this has been a blast. And obviously, I'm going to throw out that you should also watch Cabinet of Curiosities and check out all 8 episodes that Alex joined us to discuss that, because those were so much fun.
Are we getting a cabinet too?
I hope so.
I haven't heard anything. Gosh, I hope we are.
The last time I heard anything was 100 years ago now, it feels like. And I feel like too much changed during the pandemic that it's not necessarily that it's not being made so much as I just quit following things because everything was getting killed off. And I was like, this is breaking my heart.
At one point. Well, here's hoping. We need more of this stuff.
But yes, thank you so much for joining us for all of these episodes and talking about this stuff. It's always been a blast to have you here.
Most
Thank
definitely.
you so much for having me. I've always had a fantastic time with you guys.
Awesome. All right. I guess that wraps it up for another week. As always, I'm James Sabata.
And what's your favorite song, James? What do you want to listen to?
I don't know. Something by Creedence.
Play some Creedence. Say Bad Moon Rising.
And we will see you next week here at thenecronoma.com.